Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Debate Hub. I am Chesh, your master debater, and I have these four lovely, very professional, very expert individuals with us today to watch Exodus Part 2. Now, we did Part 1, and that must have been at least a year ago. We didn't watch the whole thing because it got pretty ridiculous pretty fast, but we're jumping to Episode 2, and that did get reposted the other day, so if you wanted to catch up on where we left off, please feel free to go and do that. But this time we've got Dr. Kipp joining us, which makes for 5 of us. So if you want to introduce yourselves, we're going to let Dr. Kipp go first, and then we'll go down, and then left, and then up, and that will be everybody. Dr. Kipp, how you doing? Who are you? What do you do? Where do we find you?
I'm sorry that I missed part 1. I am Kipp Davis. I'm a scholar of the Hebrew Bible and a specialist in early Judaism and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I make shit on YouTube.
That sounds about right. Dr. Josh, how are you? Good to see you, man.
I am well. Thank you. So I am Dr. Josh, and I'm an Assyriologist, and I do lots of stuff with Kipp. What?
That's true. That's true.
And Megan is heckling me.
Hi,
From
Megan.
the sidelines.
Suris, what's going on?
Hi, I have absolutely no business being here with any of these people who are actually professionals in their various fields. I make fun of people on the internet and talk about politics, so I don't know what I'm doing here, but hello.
Listen,
I guess it's because I've made fun of Jordan Peterson.
Have you seen what this show looks like?
I mean, it looks like there are 4 panels and I'm not in frame. So yes, it looks fine.
It's okay, Suris, because Jordan Peterson doesn't have a lot of professionals on his Exodus commentary video series either. So
that's entirely fair. I forgot that I have to remember to read not our room, but his room, and that is where our standards lie.
Vishanti, how are you?
Hey, I've been better, but I'm here, so I will take that as a win. And I've got some delicious snacks, some coffee, and I guess I should introduce myself. Unlike doctors Kipp and Josh, I don't have a degree in biblical studies. However, I am a rabbi in training as of last month. So I'm here to be the other shit poster and to make pretense at being a professional.
Professional in training. I'm here for it. So I know that we're a little bit short on time than we were comparatively to last time. We're going to be a little bit shorter because those videos got long really fast. So let's just dive right into it. We are on Exodus Part 2. Are you guys ready? When you want me to pause, just wave frantically and yell at me. Sound good?
Oh boy.
All right, here we go.
Oh god, it's produced by Jeremy.
Boring.
Welcome to day 2 of
Boring. That's
I
Exodus
already
seminar.
have a problem.
Yes.
I don't like his face.
You don't like his... Yeah, I'm fair.
I don't like his face.
Did all of the
he looks like
hackles...
He looks like the kind of guy that gets so strung out he has to be taken into a coma for multiple months by his family. I don't know how accurate that is, but he looks like the kind of guy to do that.
It's like the kind of guy who would do this thing that he did.
nobody should be
By
wearing
Daily
that
Wire
much
Plus.
tweed.
We're in Exodus chapter 3 today, pretty much at the beginning of it. I'll just briefly introduce everyone. We have a new participant today, Mr. Greg Hurwitz, an author and a man of many other talents. I'll let him introduce himself after I introduce...
He's a novelist, isn't he?
Perhaps you're familiar with from yesterday's episode.
He's an author
Episode 1.
and a man of other talents.
Dr. Douglas Headley, Oz Guinness,
Oh
Dr.
god.
It's Headley.
Craig Hurwitz, Dennis Prager, Dr. Stephen Blackwood, Jonathan
Seems
Hasler,
very
and
excited
Dr.
to
Jordan
say
Peterson.
Dennis Prager.
Great.
Do you know,
Yeah, he's into that.
do you know where
show.
I know? Do you know where I know Douglas Headley from? Is from his appearances on a Kunk on Britain and Kunk on Earth with Philomena Kunk. But Yeah. He's good in those.
Is it bad that a show that looks like this, that looks like the Debate Hub, or sorry, that looks like the Pornhub logo, has more, like a higher ratio of professionals than the actual, like, highly produced, paid for show?
Well, that's because there's a difference between this show and that show. This show is a bunch of people who care about a subject talking about that subject, whereas that show is propaganda, where the main goal is to get names that sound like they are as associated with it as laymen could see for the purpose of selling a narrative.
Yeah.
I just also like to point out here that, I mean, aside from the fact that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's eight old white guys sitting around. Aside from the fact that there's no women and no people of color in this discussion.
Oh, I thought you were going to leave
at
no
least
people.
3.
I was okay with that.
Oh, yeah. At least there's PhD there's PhD trained men here, but at least
not
3
in
or
the
maybe
field.
4 of them are philosophers of religion. And I think at least 3 of them work in divinity schools. And there's not a biblical scholar in sight.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit embarrassing to have as much production and as much money as the Daily Wire has, because this was produced for the Daily Wire, that they have not managed to get a single biblical scholar on this panel.
Well, why would they do that? Because
I bet they all
facts
said
don't
no.
with feelings.
It doesn't let them sell the narrative that way. Again, you don't need a real biblical scholar to convince people of your position. You just need vague experts. I say this because there is a person who owns a business where I live. It is a business that I frequent, and he is very, very just voraciously conservative. And anytime you challenge any belief of his, he comes back with some guy I know says otherwise. That is the standard that he goes by. And I use him as an example, not because he's an outlier. I use him because he's indicative of the type of audience they are trying to hit. All they have to be is good enough for somebody to reference them as an expert, not good enough for somebody who knows how to write a bibliography to know whether or not they are.
Sure. Yeah.
Craig, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm looking forward to including you in the conversation, and maybe you can say a few words about who you are. And
thank you for having me here. I'm a novelist. I write crime fiction. I'm a screenwiter also. I write comic books.
I write
as well,
crime
and
fiction.
I'm very interested in narrative and how narrative moves through
Crime
culture,
fiction.
and particularly archetypes,
So I'm
and
here
studied
to talk about
a
the
good deal of
Exodus.
Jung as well. And so I've had the opportunity to cross with several of you in the past, and I'm very happy to be engaging with you now, those of you who I haven't yet. So thanks for having me.
yeah, well,
God.
Greg's a great storyteller, and we've talked a lot about literature in the
Man,
past. He was a
If
student
we
of
were
mine
going
way
to
back.
have crime fiction writers on here, we should have invited my buddy Jordan Harper, because he's a great crime fiction writer.
Well,
He's
tell
as
your buddy,
qualified to speak
and
about this.
I'm more than happy to have them on.
Like,
Not sure how willing he'd be to subject himself to this, but yeah.
I'm as confused about what a crime fiction writer has being on that panel as what a VTuber has being on this panel.
I think it's one of those things where they brought on a new guy, we had to bring on a new guy, so we brought Dr. Kipp. But then we had to rebalance
So you brought an
it.
actual expert on, as opposed
Yeah, we had to rebalance it and still invite Suris.
Back when at Harvard, one of the brightest students I had there, and we've had a very productive
We
post-Harvard
just get to the
friendship
stuff.
over
Wait,
multiple decades.
He's
Did
gonna
he
say
say
that-
that? Did he just say
Something
that he was his student at Harvard?
No, Jordan Peterson never taught at Harvard. He taught in
I
Toronto.
didn't. Well, what's he talking about then?
Nothing. It's Jordan Peterson. He's rambling.
I just cried so hard at Pinocchio.
Happy the Greg's here. We're on Exodus chapter 3. We just cracked it yesterday, and I think I'll start right from the top. And Dr. Blackwood had some comments about a part of the chapter 3:3 that we brushed over lately or yesterday, but deserves some more in-depth consideration. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law.
To anybody else, like he just struggles to finish a thought.
Yes, it does. That's why I made the Pinocchio joke. It sounds like getting to the end of a thought is actively causing him distress, like he wants to cry.
Yeah.
The priest of Midian.
In the chat,
and he led the flock to the backside of the desert.
Hang on, Josh, one sec. So I don't know if Josh can read it, but Josh just got another one of your books. Appreciate it, brother. That's a comment in the chat. And another one is, did Jordan Peterson teach in Oxford?
His father-in-law, the priest
Inside
of Midian,
joke.
and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. Well, that's an interesting
just read
passage.
That like 2 weeks ago.
In your classes?
So the first 5 books of Torah, it's divided up into weekly like segments, and it could be as short as like a chapter or 2, or it could like span a few chapters. And the goal is either get through it in 1 year, or some people have a 3-year cycle. And they're named after like the first important word of that segment. So this one's talking about Moses' father-in-law Jethro, and that's the name of the segment. And yeah, we actually read that like 2 weeks ago. That was the weekly reading. It's actually really cool because Jethro's not an Israelite. He's just a random Midianite priest, and he pulls Moses aside and goes, "Hey man, you are like way overstretching yourself. You should delegate. In fact, delegate right now. Do it." And so Moses goes, "You know what? I think that's a good idea." So he does. And I think that's a solid plan.
Dr. Blackwood will elaborate on this. The word phenomenon is etymologically derived from the Greek word phanesthai, and that means to shine forth. And that's...
Sorry, before he goes on, is that correct? Is Jordan Peterson correct in his definition or his etymology?
Phenomenon linked to
shine.
What did he say?
Yeah, I'll play it again for you.
On this, the word phenomenon is etymologically derived from the Greek word phanesthai, and that means to shine forth.
Phanesthai.
To shine forth.
I think I have to look that up, actually.
Yeah, go for it. I'll keep playing.
Unless you know.
I have no idea. That's why I have experts.
Not there. I'd probably have to pull up TLG.
Concept worth considering because...
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, though, I mean, does it matter what the etymological root of a Greek word is when we're reading a Hebrew text?
Yeah, I don't know.
Unless
I don't know.
Think it does. Is Jordan Peterson part of this this Greek primacy movement?
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where I think he's trying to add additional weight to a specific word by saying it means more than what the text might have intended.
Yeah, let him.
Let
him cook.
Where is the word?
Going with this.
Yeah, where's the word phenomenon coming from? That's where I'm confused.
Yeah, don't. Hold on, let me put it back.
I'm looking it up here, and he said phanesthai.
Yeah,
he's either badly mispronouncing it.
Yeah, it's not in the
Or-
text either. It says
also-
now.
Like this seems like, equivalent to him reading this and then saying, the etymology of the word automobile. Like, what is? What,
I just
okay. What does
Dr.
that have
Josh,
to do
I
with
have
what
a-
you just read?
I have a very important question in relation to this, Dr. Josh. What do you think Kent Hovind would say if were he here today to help out?
I'd say, hey, good evening, folks. Kent Hovind here. Dinosaur Adventure. Let me tell you, that Greek is from the devil, okay? Because we know that the Bible's in the King James, okay? It's in the King James English. So we don't get into the Greek or the Hebrew down here in Dinosaur Adventure Land. Come on down, $59.95. Give you a discount, okay? I'm here to help.
I feel like that's gonna make it. Too much Kent Hovind makes me need brew. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, you should try his Hebrew for $5.95.
Etymologically derived from
So-
the Greek word phanes.
Sorry, go on. Yes.
No, I was just going to say the best that I've got is that the noun phanos, which is really rare, is a synonym for lampros, which means bright or radiant. I can't find the verbal form of
It
that,
sounds to
though.
me that
I mean,
what
it's
we've-
certainly
What we've decided is that what he's doing is what we all might call a non sequitur.
I think so.
I
Mhm.
mean, that's a lot of
I
what
know where
Jordan
he's going with
Peterson-
this.
It's a lot of what Jordan
Yeah,
Peterson does, though.
he's going to talk about
Yeah.
the phenomenon of the burning bush. And so in his mind, it's just word association time. So the
Yeah, right.
phenomenon of the burning bush leads him to go, oh, phenomenon's derived from this word, which means shining forth.
So-
Therefore,
I'm just going to point out ahead of time again that none of these words are in the text.
That's the
So-
same. That's the same as Trump
Ah.
saying they're seeking asylum. They're coming from mental institutions.
Yeah, well, except that's I mean that's an actual
closer.
That's an actual word. I yes, I think Trump might be still wrong, but maybe not as wrongly associating as
Not as wrong as Jordan
Peterson. Yeah.
Oh no.
He's wrong, but not as wrong as he could be.
Fair.
Thigh, and that means to shine forth. You'll note, if you look at how you attend to the world, that some things attract your attention, they beckon to you. Sometimes that's because you can voluntarily find things meaningful, so you're imposing a structure on the world, but sometimes it's as if the world is calling to you, it's pulling your attention hither and yon. And Dr. Blackwood, you had some interesting comments about what happens with Moses next.
guy.
Moses
So is
this
it
fucking guy.
is it voluntary or involuntary? Because he says voluntary and then says sometimes the world pulls to you, regardless of whether you want it to or not.
Again, it's
looked,
just,
and behold,
those
the bush
three words
burned with fire, and the bush was
Yeah.
not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside, so he deviates from his pathway, and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned.
Well, and it goes on to say, and when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, I was just really, as we were talking last night, I was thinking about, what are the conditions under which this revelation happens, and what are the conditions under which it happens in our own life, this opening up to the transcendent. And it seems to me there's something very important here in which, Moses is attending to something. And it's like Aristotle says, philosophy begins in wonder. Mm-hmm. There's this very beautiful moment in which Moses turns aside from where he is to go and attend, and that it's only because he's open to the possibility of turning aside that he sees the burning bush, and the revelation that is in that is able to unfold in his.
So he's in.
Wow, that's
It's just the
that's a
laziest,
whole lot of
most
bullshit that you can
pedestrian-
just
Yeah.
you can just deduce.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm good.
We're all just like, no, fuck this.
Like sounds like someone put in a prompt into like ChatGPT. Write me
Yeah.
an evangelical
Yes.
sermon using this prompt. That's what this feels like.
I don't know why he's trying to bring philosophy and Aristotle into this in the way that he is. Like, philosophy begins
because
with
it's a
wonder, as
table
if...
full of philosophers.
No, it is not.
I mean, what the?
It's a table full
a
of
lot
people who
them
think they
I
are.
mean, I mean, some of them legitimately are, like James Orr and Oz
Sure.
Guinness and
Yeah.
this guy. I mean, this guy who's talking now, and the other guy, the Philomena Kunk guy. They're all philosophers. So I
And then
mean,
there's Dennis Prager.
they're lost.
And a crime author.
I mean, like
Yes.
there is
Yeah.
like actual interesting stuff about this. Like verse 2 says that the bush is boer, so it's like it's burning, but it says it is not consumed, and it uses achal to eat, so which is standard. But then in verse 3, he says, I will turn aside and see why it is not ba'ar. So he's just said in verse 2 that it was boer, it was burning. But then he says in verse 3, why it's not burning. I mean, that's interesting. But I mean, I guess you'd have to know Hebrew to
You'd
do
have
that.
to actually
Dennis
be a
Prager-
biblical scholar.
Doesn't he know? Doesn't Prager know
He
Hebrew?
knows.
Yeah.
One of them.
Supposedly.
Prager, honestly, he can trump up being a religious Jew all he wants to, but I highly, highly doubt that he knows much more than like basic prayer book Hebrew if he knows that. I could be wrong. Prove me wrong, Dennis.
It just seems like it's one of those things where there, as I think Dr. Josh is right, there are interesting things to talk about here, and they're just doing everything that they can to, instead of talk about those things, make up arbitrary, not very relevant pieces of narrative analysis. And it's not even good narrative analysis.
Yeah, and I mean, like,
It's
if that's
surface
what they're
level.
doing, that's cool. I mean,
yeah, if that's what they want to do, but
Mhm.
look at this
Yeah, but I mean,
production.
like,
Look
say
at how
that.
they're selling it. Look
Yeah.
at what they're trying to say. This is some kind of like intellectual, some kind of like bringing a greater biblical understanding to the masses of the Daily Wire.
Chesh, can you give me a wrench temporarily for this session? Because
Oh
I
yeah,
would
it's Wesley. Wesley still never
Mid-time.
set up for me, but yeah, I'll give you a wrench. You're good.
Engaged in some sense in an instrumental activity, right? He's about his own business, but he's open enough to what isn't within his framework of reference, let's say, to note when something is significant that calls to him, and then humble enough to pay attention to it. And that's where he encounters God, right? And that's definitely worth
What?
considering. So
Is the point that this was like a subtle phenomenon, that he has to be open because it's subtle? There's going to be nuance
Yeah,
to it. It's
right.
a fucking burning bush.
as opposed to the fact that there's a
burning.
That's
thing
not
on fire.
consumed. Yeah.
That's the whole
God subtly
point.
told Sodom and Gomorrah that they were doing wrong by blasting their whole fucking town with a meteorite.
And
I was
Lot
very
just-
subtle.
he was-
My wife is made of salt.
Lot was subtly, he was attendant to the subtle fireball that came from the sky. So he was attendant to that.
sulfur balls.
The shepherds in their fields,
Subtle.
tending their flocks by night.
The subtle fireball. The only kind of fireball that I want.
That's
this
right.
is just
Coming.
subtle spell. It just makes me think of the plagues, because they are gonna eventually get to the plagues. I don't think it's this one, but in the next episode 3 or 4, they get into the plagues of Egypt, and I'm like, is that God being subtle?
Look, I subtly made
When you
frogs
cast-
boil out of your throat when you went to sleep.
I
tonight,
turned
okay?
the rivers to blood. I'm just dropping hints.
Subtle fireball. It's like you want to be like, I cast fireball, and you roll like a 3.
It's a subtle
And I think
fireball
just for a
because it
moment,
fits.
Oh,
Sorry, it's a subtle fireball.
here he
because what?
goes.
Oh no, we're continuing. I was just saying a terrible thing.
Okay.
That's definitely worth considering. So,
in that vein, just for a moment, I've always wondered, and I have no answer to this, if I were a shepherd, I would see burning bushes regularly.
What?
So it takes
Would
perhaps
you?
a Moses
Would you?
type, which is building on what you've just been saying, to say, hey, wait a minute. It's not being consumed, the bush. It's not burning. There's a fire.
really attentive.
I think it does suggest that.
Only special shepherds
What?
would notice this.
Someone, please, just real quick.
His
can you
shepherds hate
remind
him.
me
There's one neat trick.
whether the landscape that this was set in is particularly prone to wildfires? Because if I regularly saw bushes burning, I would be concerned.
I mean, if they're in a relatively arid area, if bushes are regularly burning, that's not the worst thing in the world, as long as there's not a bunch of foliage around it to like spread. But if they're shepherds in a decently arid area, then probably
I'm
fine.
just enjoying the idea that as Dennis Prager wanders around, life around him spontaneously combusts against his will. Like, he has no
really.
control over it. It's just things around him. Just nature wants nothing to do with him. It's just
Here's the thing. I say that
subtly
because,
explodes.
the LA Basin, which is very wildfire prone. So I'm sure you realize that we saw a lot of things burning in January, and that was not good. So he is saying, well, if I was a shepherd and I don't know the answer to this, I would see burning bushes regularly. Like, no, Dennis, you wouldn't. That's a problem.
And it's like a weird thing to just make up. Like, there's things that are interesting here. Why are you just making this up?
Well, and I mean, the problem is that, so this form of the verb appears in a number. I'm just like looking at it here, like and the Lord appeared, right? Then God appeared to him. That's not a subtle thing that happens, right? That the intent of God appearing is to make himself known. So this idea that it's this sort of subtle thing that he's got to like do a double take and be like, I wonder, is that bush not burning up? Huh. Like that's not the idea.
But how does that work in regards to what Peterson was saying? Because Peterson was saying, like, sometimes it's voluntarily and sometimes you're pulled to it. So are they trying to say that he was pulled to it voluntary or involuntary? Was it so I don't understand.
Chesh, it feels like there's this underlying assumption that you're making that it makes sense.
Okay, I'm trying to think of how it's... I think they're trying to make sense. I think that's the intention.
Peterson said people voluntarily ascribe meaning, and then they're drawn to it involuntarily, and I'm like, listen, man, pick a struggle. I mean,
I'm trying to find, very purposefully, voluntarily, trying to find meaning in what they're saying, and,
I mean, you've
but
just
they're just all sitting
described
around,
like
if you me,
you've just described 90% of fandom. I'm sorry for interrupting, but you've just described 90% of all fandom. Ascribe meaning onto something voluntarily and then involuntarily attach your life to that forever.
identity.
Also, could I just say there's a sense, when he says, to take off your shoes because the ground on which you're standing is holy. I mean, there's this real question of, is everything holy ground? I mean, it's not the world that changes, right? It's our own perception of the world that changes.
How is that? No. What
He's
these
on the
fuckers are doing is insane.
mountain of God.
Is all the world holy? No! Nowhere in any bit of text, anywhere, ever, was that even slightly alluded to. What the fuck are you talking about? What book are you reading?
pulled up on this one specific geographical location, and it's holy. Is the whole world holy?
No!
Man.
Nobody! God! Fuck!
It's the butterfly meme where it's like,
Is
One
this
burning
hologram?
Yeah.
Is holding up a planet?
Is this
Yes.
holy ground?
This makes
Yeah.
no. So not only do bushes just catch on fire all of the time, but this bush is burning and not burning, but you're voluntarily, involuntarily being pulled towards it. It's super duper subtle, and the planet is holy ground.
If the planet is holy ground and everything is spontaneously combusting, does that mean that everything you've ever walked on is consecrated? Is it all just consecrated ground now? Is none of it important now?
So then why would it not be in the Bible to never wear shoes anywhere?
It's all holy ground.
Checkmate, atheists.
And I would say there is no moment in life that isn't in itself actually holy. It's a matter of
What? What? There is no moment in your life that isn't sir, I would like to introduce you to the term gooning.
If
I'm just saying that is holy if you're into that. But also, if you're a mystic or if you're someone who's particularly devout to whatever your tradition is, yeah, every moment's holy. It's sacred. However, why does he think that that's a cogent point to be making? Because we're talking about one specific mountain, one specific parcel of land on that mountain, and one specific event. And he's, again, just going, well, I guess that means the whole world is holy, man, but then, every minute is, holy, so
oh my
are
God.
we all holy?
Well,
This
is a night. This. You go on. Sorry.
So I was like, this is bizarre to me because, I'm assuming they've done no work on this text, because there's a very clear parallel to this event, right, in the book of Joshua. So Joshua's about to go fight at Jericho, and if you remember the story, the captain of the army meets him, and he says to him, and the captain of the Lord's host said to Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And if you think about the comparison, Joshua is the servant of Moses, right? He's like the understudy. And they cross over the River Jordan just as Moses crosses over the Red Sea. There's very clear parallels between these two figures. And so this idea that there's not some sort of significance to this statement is just bizarre to me.
Yeah, and of course, spinning off of that is the reason that there's parallels. It's not a happy accident. It's not just I think this would be kind of cute and clever. It's, among other things, it's a literary attempt to show you why Joshua's authority and his succession of Moses is legit. Because Moses had all these attesting miracles and all these things, and then Joshua is picked. Joshua's not related to Moses. He's not in that family at all, like Miriam was, like Aaron was, and he's just called Joshua the son of Nun. We're well, who's that? Where's he from? It's just some guy, right? So you have to establish his legitimacy as a successor, because literally Moses' family, his extended family, is huge. And if you don't believe me, read the story about Korah. That was his first cousin. It was yo, why aren't we all getting to do cool priest stuff?
Why aren't all the bushes lighting around on fire all around us? What the hell?
And aren't we all just some guy?
Are we all just
coming to be open to, or it to be revealed as holy in your life? No, there's no moment that cannot be redeemed or made epiphanic, whether it's doing the dishes or doing the laundry or picking up the usual things.
I'm going to holily do the dishes.
None of these men do house chores. First off, there is no way.
not one?
There's nobody who works for the Daily Wire does housework. All right, that's not a thing. That's a woman's work.
Confirmed by Matt Walsh, actually, if you
by
remember.
Matt Walsh, and wasn't Ben Shapiro on that one too?
I don't remember if Ben
Yeah.
Shapiro was on that one. The one that I
But-
remember is Matt Walsh saying
Yeah.
that he doesn't do any of those chores. That's
Doesn't
all
know how
of
the
his work.
laundry machine works.
It can't be his. I mean, Ben Shapiro's wife actually works a real job though, too, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah,
they
she's a
probably have like
she's
house servants.
Yeah, because their family's worth millions. So
Yeah.
like she's a doctor, and the only reason that I'll ever remember she's a doctor is the whole fiasco with Ben Shapiro letting us know that if your wife's wet, that means she has an infection. My doctor wife told me so.
I still like that the internet trolled him so hard he went and got. Sorry.
I want
go
to
ahead.
read something in the chat, and I think I just need a second to get into the proper mode. I don't have a weed pen to hit, but just pretend that I'm doing it. Like, Ontotheos, liar, worldviewish, trivialism, or dialethism, viciously spiralize their antinomic-ness science, paraconsistent logic, principle of explosion, bunch of biblical citations.
I thought we were watching a Nightmare Blunt rotation. Why are we becoming one?
Is the principle of explosions, are they subtle enough?
Like, whatever you're on, person with that ridiculous user avatar, I want some.
Of any day or the usual toils and tribulations of normal life, there's no moment that doesn't have in it the possibility of divine revelation. And so it's
Your shoes are off.
yes, if you're have the spiritual
I'm sorry, I just like the idea that you can only have biblical revelation if your shoes are off, which means there are certain places in the world that are way more likely to have revelation than others. So, like, Americans famously wear their shoes in the house. Canadians do not. So, are Canadians getting more divine revelations? By that logic?
Clearly, but
Obviously.
importantly, let's remember here that Moses actually receives the revelation before removing the shoes from his feet.
True.
let's say, stance or attunement to let that discovery happen.
Yeah, well, that's part of what meditative practice is supposed to instill in you as a habit. And there's something nourishing about that if it's practiced properly. And that is the
I don't
relief
have
in some sense of
any
being
problem
immersed in something.
meditation. Cool. People practice it. It's great for them. Awesome. Like, I'm super happy for y'all. But what the hell does this have to do with Exodus?
Are you allowed to meditate with your shoes on?
It's giving me reasons
Yep.
to have an Exodus from their video more than anything.
Yeah,
Good.
we're living in some kind of like Twilight tangent that's just never ending.
Yeah, imagine if everybody speaking
a
was a
blunt
Jordan
rotation.
Peterson.
Yeah.
That's outside of you, that's beyond your conception. There's a terror that's associated with that in principle, like there might be terror with a burning bush, but it's also extremely salutary in the most fundamental sense. So, and nourishing.
Why would there be terror associated with meditation? To whom or what are you saluting in the most fundamental sense? And yeah, it can be nourishing. I mean, David Lynch was really big into transcendental meditation. He opened schools for it. It's really beneficial for people who practice it. Cool.
I have a theory.
What does that have to do with Exodus?
I have a theory. It doesn't have anything to do with Exodus, but I have a theory as to why Jordan Peterson, the individual, and Suris, you can see if you agree with me on this one, because I think this is your line. I suspect that the reason why terror is associated with meditation for Jordan Peterson is him projecting it onto everybody else in saying that this man cannot be left alone in his own head. He is afraid of that.
That would... So, I can't describe what actually goes on in somebody else's head. But
Yeah,
based on what Jordan Peterson says very, very often in relation to how he views media, for example, the landscape that he views media in is a terrifying one. It is a very strange and a very weird one to see media the way that Jordan Peterson does. If you've ever heard him talk about a story, if you've heard him describe DNA, like the way he thinks of everything is this weird warped landscape where everything is ascribed extra value that it normally doesn't have. The type of person that does that spends so much time in their own head, they are very likely their worst enemy. So I can't hitch my horse to that theory because I don't know what's going on in his head, but I would assume that you're not too far off course.
Yeah, that tracks.
And the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, and so that speaks to your point too. The Lord responds, the thing that's put in the highest place responds to Moses' response to the call, right? And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here am I. And he said, God said, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said,
Don't forget,
I am
if
the
you're
God
going
of...
to read the Bible, you have to make people think that you're ultra smart because only the King James Version will make you sound smart. You can't read it in those bullshit pedestrian translations like the NIV.
It's also really weird that this is supposed to be based on biblical scholarship. Which version of the Bible are they reading?
They didn't tell us.
They're okay, cool. That's
one
not
of the
very
oldest
welcoming.
English ones. Yeah.
Right. But it's not a great... It was outdated even when they published it in like 16 whatever.
Because like
when they put it out, people were already like, yo, this is kind of antiquated. Like, why are you talking like this?
Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the more accurate translations that we have is New American Standard, correct?
It's
That's
not bad.
That's generally considered fairly decent.
It depends on... Well, it depends on what you mean by accurate. Do you want word for word? Do you want concept for concept? Are you trying to, like, tease out idioms and things like that? Because every translation is going to be strong on some counts and weak on others.
Okay.
If you go word for word, obviously it's not going to really make any sense in English because the syntax is completely different. But if you go concept by concept, it'll get you pretty close. If you want just a reading copy, I like NASB. It's pretty not bad. NRSV is also not a bad reading copy, though I did have some qualms with a couple things that they translated. But King James is just, it's stilted, it's hard to parse. Nobody talks like that, and the only reason people want to continue reading is to make it sound highfalutin.
Yeah, it makes it sound like your words have gravitas.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, great, but this would have been communicated in the vernacular. It wouldn't have been like, and then God spoke unto me. Like,
yeah,
people didn't have a printing press. They didn't all have a copy they were running around with. Would have heard somebody reading it. So,
yeah, when I was in PCA, the only thing they would let us read was KJV. And we were never given a very good reason as to why that was the case. That was just what the, quote, non-denominationals, really just Southern Baptists, would allow us to use.
Well, doctors, if you were to recommend what they're doing, if somebody was trying to put this together in a more, like, comprehensible and feasible way, in your opinion, which version of the Bible would you use, or would you use multiple versions and make comparisons?
I mean, so this is I don't really recommend English translations. This is going to sound, I don't know how this is going to sound. I don't use them very often because I don't read the New Testament all that much, right? Because fewer fucks I could not give. But sorry, that's terrible, but it's true.
Welcome. No, you're on Debate
though.
Hub. You're fine.
So I spend most of my time in the Hebrew Bible, and most of the time I'm looking at the Hebrew. So I mean, most people that I say this to go, oh, I can't believe it. I like the NIV. Now, I mean, like, I wouldn't go making arguments based on it or something, but I feel like it captures the essence of what the text is saying for the most part. There's a passage in Jeremiah that says, like, if you read it in a more I don't know, word for word style translation, it'll say something like, do the white like, does the white ever escape or flee from the tops of the mountains or something like that? And that's even
Like
even
talking
too
about
clear. Yeah, it's the snow, right? So then, like,
Yeah.
you know, the NIV says, does the snow ever melt from the top of the mountains, right? You know, it's like,
Straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So, I mean,
paraphrasing,
if
but
you-
it's paraphrasing fairly well.
yeah, I mean,
As
so
sure
I
as
guess,
that's an olive branch.
Hey Josh,
Well played,
I actually
sir.
have a question for you and Kipp about some of the grammar, and I figure I should ask this so like some of the audience can actually learn something in this stream.
How dare you?
In verse 4, we have, Moses. He's talking to whomever. If you think it's God or the angel, doesn't matter to me. Vayomer Moshe, Vayomer Hineni. So it's like, and he said, Moses, and he said, here I am. And he said, so I guess we're going back to the original speaker.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take her off. So, can you talk a little bit about what me, an English speaker, would see as kind of a lack of clarity between the and he said and he said and he said and he said there?
You want to do a Kipp? You want me to? Why don't you go ahead? I've been talking about.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. You're just.
They're both so
wondering-
polite.
I mean, I'm not sure. So it's always the like you're pointing out here that it's the repetition of the same form in multiple succession here, right, Vish? Is that what you're getting at?
She's nodding.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's, like,
okay.
there's no
I'm not
explicit.
Yeah, I can't.
And I can't
So
see
there's-
anything.
Yeah.
So,
There's Kipp. There's
Like-
no like explicit. There's no explicit
yeah,
subject
right.
outside of
So
the
there's no
verbal form.
Yeah, because-
subject attached
Yeah.
to each one.
Yeah, in verse
So
4,
and
it
usually
opens up with.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and this is like, and I think, very often. So this is in large part just a function of the expression that we identify as the Volve consecutive, right? Where you see these appearing, they're usually indicative of the beginning of a thought. So, like where you see a lot of the recurrence of these verbs without subjects, every time you see one, it's a good bet that the speaker has changed. And I don't know. There's other ways to do this in the language if it was just the same speaker continuing to speak. Yeah, so I don't, yeah, does that help?
And if
Not-
the other thing that makes this sort of stand out as a clear occurrence from the text is this play on using kara, right, to call, and then the
Mhm.
repeated form of the vocative Moses, right? Like you have this sort of this, like, if you read through, what is it, 1 Samuel 3, you have Yahweh calling to Samuel, and I don't know how often it's repeated, but certainly this, he calls out to Samuel, and Samuel says, and he said, Hineni, right? Here am I. This phrase or this form, Hineni, or Hineni, it can take different forms, slightly different forms, is really, it's sort of standard. And so that sort of, I think that would just be known to the reader, that you're going to have somebody making a call, right? And then somebody is going, like
Someone
giving
responding.
the vocative. Somebody's responding, and then after the response, the hineni, then the original person is going to give their message, right? So I think there's a lot that plays into this. But yes, the Vav consecutive imperfect, I think, is really, yeah. Sorry. Like what you said is right.
Kind of looking for clarification, because verse 4 opens with, and Hashem called and said, and then he called and said, and then he said, and he said, and there's not a direct in that specific instance. We know Moses is responding, but then it goes right back with another and he said, and you're like, okay, the ambiguity there, if you were to just kind of pause, there would be a question of wait, who's talking? Because it's just, and he said, and he said, and he said. And I'm wondering, when you're describing a conversation between two people, do you need that clarification of who's speaking?
Well, we do this. I mean, another when you're reading fiction, right? You indicate you don't have to indicate a new speaker by saying, say it's a story about Vish and Josh says something, and Vish responds to him. If you're writing fiction, you don't have to actually say Vish responded and said. You could just put that on a new paragraph, right? It's a convention of writing.
Well, let me clarify. In that
the
particular
same sort of
instance, you would be able to
happening here, though.
Be able to tell who's talking by the pronouns, because we have two different pronouns. He said, she said.
No, I mean, yeah, but you don't even have to say that, though, right? You could just put a statement in the vocative and end it and start a new paragraph with quotation marks, and this signals that this is another person speaking.
And I think the other part of this is in the same way that we would do this in English, the content of what's being said is sort of indicative. So, I mean, obviously something apparent, here in verse 6, Anochi Elohei Avicha, I am the God of your father. Yeah. Only one person could say that.
Probably.
Right.
But even what's said before, remove your shoes, giving a command like that, probably not from the human to the deity for a couple of reasons. But I think we do stuff like this. If you've got Harry coming to Hermione and Harry's carrying a big jug of milk, well, I guess it would have to be coming to Ron, and he said, put the milk over there. You might not know who the he is, but it's probably Ron, because, I mean, I guess Harry could be handing it to him and saying, Ron, put the milk over there. But, so, I mean, I see what you're saying with that ambiguity.
There would be some additional context, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready?
Of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face.
Yeah, I
was
heard
afraid
Isaiah. That was weird.
To look upon God. I read in Jung years ago this idea that I found extremely compelling and useful, which
No! Every single time Peterson brings up Jung, I want to claw my ears out.
Oh.
Now you need to know about what an archetype is. No, I don't. No, the fuck I don't. Stop.
They haven't even gotten to like the story yet. Why are we talking about archetypes already?
I don't know. It's Jordan Peterson.
That's
He
all
can't
Jordan
help
Peterson
himself.
knows what to talk about.
He talks about Jung. It's his thing. I don't know why he's like this.
Was that every ideal is simultaneously and necessarily a judge. And so you imagine that the ideal is something that beckons to you, but you're also...
Every ideal is a judge.
What does that
Those
mean?
are words, right? I
Yes,
recognize all of
in
those
fact
words.
Uh-huh.
That's
Do
all I got.
do you think that like somebody could go and watch Jordan Peterson's videos and then like cut all the word salad out and then just compile every video he's ever made into one 5-minute video?
I think
You
You
also
get a whole
pay
5
that
minutes
would
out of
happen.
that.
in comparison to the ideal. And so by apprehending an ideal, you're also simultaneously judged. And the higher the ideal, the more intense the judgment in some real sense. I think that's partly why people are terrified of great art, like Michelangelo's David.
What the fuck?
People are afraid of David?
An ideal.
People are afraid of Michelangelo's David. No, only you. Only you are afraid of Michelangelo's David because you're afraid of everything. Pinocchio makes you break down and cry, you fucking twerp.
I don't get it. What's there to be afraid of?
How do ideals, which are concepts, how do they judge? How do they beckon?
Concepts
I don't-
scary.
I feel like it's, I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, obviously, in any way, but I mean, like, that's
I don't think
interesting to me.
Jordan
because-
Peterson is anymore either, is he?
But like when I think about
Sorry,
an
go on,
ideal, I know, like when I think about an ideal, I think of something that I aspire to. But he seems to view it as something
I'm
that
afraid.
Yeah.
like he fails to achieve, and so it's framed in this sense of I have not attained, I have fallen short, which is really interesting to me anyway, to
I
think about
think-
the way those two things are framed.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot you can learn about somebody just based off of the language that they use. And Jordan Peterson's language, to me, indicates, again, I'm also not a psychologist, and I'm obviously not his psychologist, but with, like, the amount of, like, commentary and analysis and blah, 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 he reads to me as somebody who is very much nosy in everybody else's shit, but also in a way where he wants to try and psychoanalyze everybody else. Yeah, and so because he wants to psychoanalyze to make himself feel like he's the smartest person in the room is an issue of control, and is an issue of he's constantly talking about how scary everything is. So he seems to me as he is some kind of individual who has an inferiority complex, and who it feels like he is a very, very small individual in a very large world that he has no control over.
I think we can all rest assured that he has a massive penis, like, so we don't need to worry about that.
Obviously, yeah, obviously.
So, now that you mentioned that, not that part, but the stuff you said before, Josh, makes me think that he's got an idea of what ideal means from idealist. Like he doesn't seem to understand how English works. And so he's just transporting one of the more common meanings of an idealist is someone, who is constantly after the unobtainable, and assuming that must be what ideal means.
I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Read a great commentary
It just-
on
it
that.
just-
The commentators.
It just helps so much to to recognize that maybe Jordan Peterson's shtick just stems from the fact that he never learned English.
Well, you know, his educational history and his job as a professor is definitely like full of everyone else regretting their decisions to put up with him. Riddled with it.
Art, like Michelangelo's David. I read a great commentary on that. The commentator suggested that the statue calls upon you to be far more than you are. So there's that judgment. And I think part of what happens to Moses here is that he's afraid to look upon God, the God of Abraham that calls people to adventure, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God that calls people to adventure and sacrifice.
The God of fear.
Sorry, like, this is so interesting. It shouldn't be, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
Ascribing agency, which is a thing that people do, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a very real thing, but ascribing agency to this inanimate object,
and not just any
obviously,
agency, like a judgment, like this statue is looking down on you, like you'll never be as good as this statue.
That is really interesting because, like, again, people frame these things very differently, right? And I can only imagine, most people that I see walking through a museum aren't walking through going, my God, I suck. Oh my God, I suck so
Look at all
bad.
these eyes looking at me. No.
Right? They go, man, this is incredible. Like, nobody goes to a baseball game and watches some like amazing baseball play. I mean, I say nobody. Clearly, Jordan Peterson does, and says like, "I'll never be a home run hitter like him. I'm so awful." Right? Like,
I'm a bad person. I've failed at life.
This is very interesting.
It sounds miserable. Like,
Imagine being Jordan Peterson for 5 seconds, and now quickly stop imagining it.
Quick stop, no.
I will not.
But now, what is this? Sorry, I will stop doing this.
No, go.
But, like, what does this mean for the people that in order for him to be comfortable, he has to have around him?
Yeah.
Because he can't have people that are like really educated or like superior in some way in his mind to him, because then he's just fearful all the time of them.
That's why he hangs
like,
out
I
the
wonder
Daily
if
Wire.
that plays. Yeah, I wonder if that plays into this. That's sorry. It's
Don't apologize.
outside of my field.
This is what we're here for.
I think he's one of those guys that goes around hyper aware of his own inadequacy, and he's just going to make it everyone else's problem.
That's why he's like the leader of the incels.
Yeah, I am far more comfortable knowing for a fact I'm inadequate and then using it to my advantage.
Oh, absolutely.
As opposed to just being terrified of everybody around me being better than me.
All right, let's get through this last little bit of what he's trying to say, and then we'll call it.
Sacrifice and then out of slavery as well is that ideal that's ultimately terrifying in some real sense. And so Moses hides his face, for he was afraid to look upon God.
No.
They're negotiations.
What?
No. He hid his face because he's looking at a fucking god. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than this.
I'm
guys.
liking the idea that Moses is just like, oh, this burning bush, I'm so inadequate. I wish I was a burning bush. I don't understand. Like, we've only watched
Moses
10 minutes of this, and it makes no
Moses
sense.
got fire crotch envy.
Is there anything so far in the 10 minutes of this that we have watched that is like a cohesive point?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cohesive point is these people feel very inadequate.
Very inadequate. Yeah.
It's
and
just
so they drumming up, just like trying to. I mean, he used the word epiphanic.
Yeah.
Epiphanic. I mean, like, you break out your GRE study guide to get that one, right?
Right.
Ooh, epiphanic. I'll write that one down.
I do want to
I won't
point
say it's
out,
an epiphany.
You do realize that they're in a circle jerk,
Really
right?
lost in the sauce.
Like, this is a
Literally.
round table. They are circle jerking.
Yes.
That's and it's all it seems to be. And like, people pay money for this, like a real money. And I just don't. I cannot grasp like what the point is besides their own, like, look at how great and smart we all are. Like,
Yeah, they're
like,
just
what,
in there
how does this
hotboxing their own
benefit
farts.
anybody? I don't think it does.
I think I watched someone when this series came out talk about, you know, how they made it, and they apparently all went to like a fancy mansion or resort, you know, and got to hang out all day and ride jet skis and sit on the beach and you know, eat great food and drink lots of wine and
it was all a tax write-off.
No doubt, but
Man.
yeah,
Get a tax write-off for drinking wine.
and talking about like and spouting bullshit about nothing. Yeah, sure, that'd be nice.
Any last thoughts?
Why am I here?
I don't know. Why are you here?
I ask that a lot.
Kip is looking
were,
at
like,
his new
here on this-
computer and he's feeling inadequate.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll never be
Do
that new
mean-
computer.
Do you mean here on this hallowed ground? Do you mean here on this channel? Do you mean...
On
Which is everywhere in
the holy
Epiphanic.
ground of the earth?
No, I mean, why are
Very
we here in this canyon fighting against the blue guys?
the red versus blue reference.
I had to. It was right there.
Did anybody besides me get that joke?
Oh,
Nope.
incredible.
Just
Incredible.
me. Thank you so much for joining
I mean,
us.
I was expecting the worst.
Yeah. Did it meet your expectations?
Oh,
And it delivered.
it surpassed them because I'm still trying to process where there is some semblance of coherence that anybody has said
Oh,
so
here.
far.
I got you. I've got you. Here you go.
All right.
Here you go.
What you just said
Yeah.
is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. God have mercy on your soul.
Thank you, Chesh. Thank you. That's certainly.
I award you no points.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's close, but I award you no points.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for us. Thank you so much for joining us on Debate Hub. We're not doing a Q&A today because that would go into our thing, and it would be crazy to try and do a Q&A with all four of you people. Although it would be wonderful to do at some point. And I'm sure I
have
will.
another 20 minutes I can hang out.
You already did
If
your
you
Q&A.
want.
You Q&A'd these two in the middle of the stream about grammar.
Oh, yes. Right.
I will hopefully bring these guys back on for either this or some other things. So thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Their links are also down below. Say goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very
Goodbye,
much for having me.
everybody.
Goodbye. Have a good
everybody.
night.
Thanks, Chesh.